The National Library in Dublin currently houses a most interesting 51-page pamphlet. The pamphlet, first published in early 1866, was authored by D.K.Gavan and titled Gems of Old Erin. It was printed by the Dublin Printing Establishment, which had its headquarters at 94 Middle Abbey Street in Dublin. Gems of Old Erin included titles such as Pat Murphy and His Fairies, Advertising for a Wife, and A Drop of Old Malt. Pages 18 to 21 featured all 7 verses of The Rocky Road to Dublin, Gavan's self-penned ballad, which was destined to take the world of Irish folk music by storm. Unfortunately, there are no known images of D.K.Gavan, and we do not know what the initials D.K. stood for. In truth, we know little about him, save to say that this Galway poet frequently advertised his songs in the Galway Vindicator, and it seems that he spent the latter part of his life in the United States. More about this later. In February 1866, Gavan placed an ad in the Vindicator saying that the stanzas contained within Gems of Old Erin were dedicated to those venerable pillars of our race known as the Rael Owl Stock, as they appeared in their pride 50 years ago at fairs, patterns, wakes, weddings, and christening parties. This collection of songs, he added, was available to buy at Thomas J. Connolly's booksellers in Mainguard Street, Galway, and at Thomas Kelly's in Loughrea. Far removed from the sedate and polite drawing-room ballads of the day, Gavan's Rocky Road to Dublin spoke of the trials and tribulations endured by Paddy as he made his way by foot and by horse and coach from Tuam, County Galway, to Dublin, via Athlone and Mullingar, the latter 2 towns being in County Westmeath. Paddy is on his way to England to offer his services as a land labourer or spalpeen. On reaching Dublin, he takes a walk through the city, only to have his bundle stolen in that neat locality. He then stows himself on the lower deck of a steamer bound for Liverpool, and suffers a bout of seasickness as the steamer sails off Holyhead. On arriving in Liverpool, he is called a fool by some local yobs, at which point he wheels his stick toward them off, and is ably assisted in doing so by some Galway boys who happen to be standing nearby. Though essentially a stage Irish comic song, it is an exceptionally crafted story set to rhyme. Thankfully, Gavan told us what the Rocky Road was about in his own words. This song, he said, is not intended as a caricature, quite the contrary. Our hero being a poor, hard-working Irishman who, having no harvest of his own to reap in his own country, pays an annual visit to the sister kingdom in order to oblige his neighbours there, and to reap a golden harvest for himself. His humour under such adverse circumstances is quite characteristic, and it is not until, he fancies, the owl's sod is culminated that his worst passions are aroused. The slip-jig or hop-jig melody which accompanied the song was itself known as the Rocky Road to Dublin. It was also known by other names, such as An Bór Carrick Go Baile Clia, Black Burk, An Baril, and The Promenade. Given its slip-jig time signature, Gavan's Rocky Road takes quite a bit of breath control to sing, but it was soon being sung and promoted by quite a number of music hall stars. By the 1860s, Dublin had its fair share of music halls, each seeking to quench the public's seemingly insatiable appetite for talking animals, contortionists, or singers performing comic songs. Enter stage left, D.K.Gavan. Before Gems of Old Erin saw the light of day, Gavan had already established a reputation for writing comical ditties, having previously had a hit with Lannigan's Ball, his song which began in the town of a thigh when Jeremy Lannigan battered away till he hadn't a pound. Lannigan's Ball was included in Red, White and Blue Monster Songbook, which was published back in 1860. A quick look at his clever lyrics would lead the reader to suspect that D.K.Gavan was in fact a nom de plume used by someone who decided to abandon serious poetry in favour of making a few bob by writing commercial songs. What we know for certain is that Gavan's output was greatly admired by the English music hall performer and comic songwriter, handsome Harry Clifton. Another admirer was T.P. Carey, a Dublin-based comedian and member of a troupe of musicians and actors known as the Irish Minstrels. According to the Entertainment Gazette, The Era, in March 1860, Harry Clifton staged the last of a series of shows at Jude's Concert Hall in Grafton Street, Dublin, then returned to England armed with a batch of Gavan's humorous ditties, including The Rocky Road to Dublin and Lannigan's Ball. On the 7th of October 1862, Paddy Carey, in his persona as the Dublin Carman, sang The Rocky Road to Dublin at the Theatre Royal, and he also performed Gavan's No Irish Need Apply, a song criticising owners of boarding houses who saw fit to post such signs at the front of their establishments. Much to Clifton's satisfaction, English audiences could not get enough of Gavan's Rocky Road. But Clifton was deeply concerned about the song being sung by other music hall performers, who not only refused to credit both he and Gavan, but refused to pay them. Consequently, on the 22nd of February 1863, Clifton placed an ad in the Era, warning all performers to immediately desist from singing it. After all, The Rocky Road was written expressly for him by Gavan, and was strictly copyright and legally protected. But Clifton's reprimand seems to have fallen on deaf ears. In Dublin, Paddy Carey continued to thrill audiences with the song, as did his fellow music hall performer Pat Sellers. The sheet music of The Rocky Road to Dublin was published around 1867 by Hopwood and Crew, a publishing house based in New Bond Street, London. The accompanying note informing readers that the music was arranged by M. Hobson. It's not exactly known what became of D.K.Gavan, but it seems that he may well have taken the emigrant boat to America, settled in New York, and became involved with Democrat Party politics. I say this because if we take a look at the Tammany Hall Times from March 1899, we see a 6-verse comic poem, very similar in style to that of Lannigan's Ball and The Rocky Road, titled Reverend Dr. Rainsford Rebuked. The poem criticised the views of Reverend Dr. William Stephen Rainsford, a rather pompous Irish-born church minister who had also made New York his home. Seemingly, Rainsford had been less than complimentary about the Irish living in the Big Apple, and Gavan had clearly set out to redress the balance. Irish emigrants popularised The Rocky Road to Dublin throughout America, Canada and Australia. In the early 1900s, the song became a party piece for the diminutive Will Crooks, the affable trade unionist and politician from Poplar in London. Each Christmas, Crooks would arrive at the Poplar workhouse and treat the residents to a spirited rendition of Gavan's song. Back in Dublin, Journalists reporting on GAA games often used the song title when reporting on teams coming up from the country to do battle at Croke Park. In 1964, the song featured on albums by the Clancy Brothers and the Dubliners, and was subsequently recorded by a host of other singers, including Paddy Riley, Christy Moore, the Pogues, and Damien Dempsey. But the lyrics in these versions differ slightly from the original, which had no chorus. But in the more modern versions, there is a chorus, which goes as follows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, hunt the hare and turn her down the rocky road and all the way to Dublin, whack-fa-lal-di-da. In the original, the singer is directed to holler the words Fá a Ballad, or clear the way, just after the lines with a loud hooray they joined in the affray, Fá a Ballad, then to continue with we quickly cleared the way for the rocky road to Dublin. Perhaps the most dynamic version of the song was recorded by Luke Kelly, who sang the opening line as in the merry month of May, which seems odd, since the original began with in the merry month of June, the last word of the line rhyming beautifully with Gavan's ensuing line, the girls of Tuam. That aside, Kelly succeeded in taking the song to new heights, away from its comedic stage Irish roots. His feisty interpretation simply drew the listener into hearing about the adventures experienced by a determined man who set out on a journey from Connacht to Lancashire. And so ends the story of the rocky road to Dublin. In the merry month of June, from my home I started, left the girls of Tuam, sad and broken-hearted, shook hands with father dear, kissed my darling mother, drank a pint of beer, my grief and tears to smother, then off to reap the corn, leave where I was born. I cut the stout blackthorn to banish ghosts and goblin, brand new pair of brogues, rattled o'er the bogs, frightened all the dogs on the rocky road to Dublin, died. The steam coach was at hand, the driver said he'd cheapens, even a luggage van was too much for my halfpence, for England I was bound, 'twould never do to balk at every step of the ground. Bedad, says I'll walk it, I didn't sigh or moan, until I saw athlone a pain in my shin bone. It set my heart a troubling, and fearing the big cannon, looking o'er the Shannon, I very quickly ran unto the rocky road to Dublin, died. In Mullingar that night I rested limbs so weary, and started by daylight next morning light and early, took a drop of the pure to keep me spirits from sinking, always an Irishman's cure whene'er he's on for drinking. See the lassie smile, laughing all the while at my comical style, 'twould set your heart a bubbling, the creatures were so gay. If I could only stay, sure I'd never get away on the rocky road to Dublin, die. In Dublin next arrived, I thought it such a pity to be so soon deprived a view of that fine city. Then I took a stroll all among the quality, my bundle it was stolen, and neat locality something crossed me mind. When I looked behind, no bundle could I find. Upon me stick a wobbling, inquiring for the rogue, they said my Connacht rogue wasn't much in vogue on the rocky road to Dublin. A coachman raised his hand as if myself was wanting. I then went to a stand full of cars for jaunting. Jump up, my boy, says he, that I will with pleasure, into the strawberry beds. I'll drive you at your leisure, a strawberry bed, says I. Oh, that would be too high, on one of straw I lie, and the berries won't be troubling. He drove me out so far upon an outside car, we had a roaring war on the rocky road to Dublin. Ah, but soon I got away, my spirits never failing, and landed on the quay. Just as the ship was sailing, the captain at me roared, said that no room had he when I jumped aboard. A cabin bound for Paddy, down among the pigs. I played some funny rigs and danced some hearty jigs. The water round me bubbling, and when off Holyhead I wished myself was dead, or I was safe in bed on the rocky road to Dublin. The boys of Liverpool, when in the dock we landed, called myself a fool. I could no longer stand it, my blood began to boil, my temper I was losing. Poor Old Erin's eye, they all began abusing her. Miss Soul, says I, Miss Shillelagh, I let fly some Galway boys were by and saw I was a hobbling, and with a loud array they joined in the affray. We quickly cleared the way for the rocky road to Dublin.